There have been lingering questions that still don't have satisfactory answers about how those buildings fell in the way they did. Uniquely in the history of building fires, those 3 buildings collapsed in on themselves on videotape, so we know, including a building, Building 7, that was not even touched by a commercial airliner. It never got hit by a plane, and yet it collapsed that afternoon. So people have been asking these questions for 24 years, and to my great discredit and shame, I mocked them for asking those questions, but of course I was ignorant, and I didn't want to know what the truth was. But the more you look into it, the more disturbing it becomes. For example, it is true. It is not a conspiracy theory that an analysis of the dust from Building 7, from the collapse of Building 7, World Trade Center 7, the one that was not hit by a plane, shows that in that dust are bits of explosive. What? This is a building that, again, I don't have videotape of people, putting TNT around the structure of the building. I can't say there was a controlled demolition. No one has admitted participating in it. But it is true that a chemical analysis of the dust from that building found explosives. And no one has bothered to explain how that could be. At very least, the American public, whose lives and country completely upended and changed forever, as someone who's old enough to remember life before 9/11, I can tell you it bore no resemblance to life now. I think we should demand, and I mean forcefully demand, unequivocally demand, full disclosure of all documents related to 9/11. And don't give me some bullshit story about how it's a national security threat to tell me the truth about what happened in my country to people I know 24 years ago. And then you go and you kill millions of people, literally millions of people died. Millions of people died, most of them innocents, in the war on terror. Thousands of Americans were killed, or their lives were destroyed, or they killed themselves later. The entire Bill of Rights, the core of the Bill of Rights, is basically evaporated. The government can do whatever it wants to you. It can spy on you. It can throw you in prison without charging you for years. What? That would be unthinkable. Guantanamo Bay would have been unthinkable before 9/11. Now it's just accepted. So you can't tell me, as someone who lived through that, who's paid for this government my entire life, whose birthright ownership in this government is, I was born here, this is my government, I'm an owner of this government. You can't look at me and say, you don't have a right to know. F you. Yes, I do. And I think if you had a couple 100 million people making that case and saying, I want to know now, actually, son. Can you hear me? I think our whole posture toward government needs to change. I'm not a supplicant. I'm not here to kiss your ass or ask your permission. I'm your boss. This is my government. You just work here. Give me the documents right now.
Pancake theory, according to which the fires, while not melting the steel, heated it up sufficiently to cause the floors weakened by the airplane strikes to break loose from the steel columns, and this started a chain reaction.
So you would expect then from that theory, which is the official theory, to see a whole stack of floors piled up on top of each other and then a spindle of core columns standing too.
The core of each of the twin towers consisted of 47 massive steel columns. If the floors had broken loose from them, these columns would have still been sticking up into the air 1,000 feet.
The plane did not cut all those core columns.
We designed the buildings to take the impact of the Boeing 707 hitting the building at any location.
The building probably could sustain multiple impacts of jetliners.
That the plane flew straight into the building.
Through him, right. Yeah.
So you're saying that the building was actually designed to cope with a hole like that and still survive?
Yeah, it was.
If you had dropped, say, a billiard ball from the top of the World Trade Center, 110 floors up there, it would have taken 8 to 10 seconds to hit the ground, encountering no resistance whatsoever.
The Twin Towers came down in nearly free fall speed. 200,000 tons of steel shatters and explodes outwards over 500 feet.
This means that floors shattered at an average rate of about 10 floors per second.
There is no scenario for a pancake effect of buildings falling that allows them to fall at the rate of free fall.
Now what can do that? What can move mass out of the way explosives. 47 huge steel columns going up the core. They're interconnected. How do you get them to fail simultaneously so the core disappeared? It looks like those core columns were cut.
The way we do this is by cutting the beam at an angle.
I started looking at the molten metal. All three buildings, both towers in the rubble, in the basement areas, and Building 7, there's these pools of molten metal.
You'd get down below and you'd see molten steel running down the channel rails. Like you're in a foundry. Like lava.
The molten steel was found 3, 4, and 5 weeks later, when the rubble was being removed. He said that molten steel was also found underneath World Trade Center 7.
So I'm looking through the official reports. What do they say about the molten metal? They say nothing. But wait a minute. This is important evidence. So where did that come from? Thermite is so hot that it'll just cut through steel, through structural steel, for example, like a knife through butter. The products are molten iron and aluminum oxide, which goes off primarily as a dust. You know those enormous dust clouds? You can imagine when you assemble these chemicals on a large scale.
So, Professor Niels Harrit, you examined the rubble that came from the World Trade Center. What did you find in it?
Well, in there we find remains of what we characterize as a thermitic material. And this is a very energetic material which can be used either for melting iron or it can be designed as an explosive. The evidence for controlled demolition is overwhelming. I told you that the thermite reaction produced molten iron. Molten iron was in pools of molten iron in the rubble. And the point is that the thermite kept on reacting. This was a bitch's brew of thermite chemistry.
Molten metal pools under both towers after they collapsed and Building 7. Now, Building 7 wasn't even hit by a jet.
To weaken the building, that means the staircase, all the staircases have to be cut at intervals. The firewalls have to be removed. The elevator shafts have to be cut.
I looked down to my right, and the elevators exploded, something out of like a Bruce Willis Die Hard movie. People just come running out of the elevators on fire, fireball. I mean, it was like, what is going on here? Something's up here. I mean, the plane's up there, now there's fire down here.
Then you have to move to the support columns on the particular load floors. And those are cut by a torch for two reasons. First, to weaken them, and also to allow for charges to be placed onto the structure, onto the columns themselves. And that essentially reduces their strength by about 20%. And even with all of that work being done to weaken this building, it still remains safely standing, so we can continue to work in it. The story that just I don't see how this could actually happen in real life. When we load a building, we have to have all the support columns on a given load floor fail at the same time, within milliseconds of one another. And therefore, the entire building comes down in a synchronized implosion. So I think this notion of a one column failure causing an entire building to implode in a synchronized fashion is just nonsense. Looking at the building, it wouldn't be a problem once you gained access to the elevator shafts.
How about an elevator modernization, which we know was going on the 9 months prior to 9/11? Yes, Elevator World, March 2001 documents it. In fact, they were in the middle of this modernization. There are people who noted that the elevators were locked in turn and that there were guards placed at these locked elevators during The elevators were locked in turn and that there were guards placed at these locked elevators during the modernization. Of course, you would have to have access to security. Securicom was brought in. Who sits on the board of Securicom? Marvin Bush, the younger brother of George Bush.
Then a team of loading experts would have access to all the core columns and beams. The rest could be accomplished at that point by just the right kind of explosives for the job at hand. The choices are many out there. You wouldn't need miles and miles of det cord. You could have used wireless remote detonators, and they have been available for years. You need to only look at an action movie to see them in use, and of course the military has them as well.
You want to call your mother or something? You gotta get back to me.
Contractors don't use them.
You gotta get back to me.
Contractors don't use them, on the other hand, because they're just too expensive. Well, you wouldn't have found steel casings to be left in the rubble. They haven't been used for years. What we use now is RDX copper-jacketed shape charges, and when they're initiated, there's nothing left of those charges. And in the case of thermite, well, thermite self-consuming cutting charges have been around since they first patented in 1984. So there would be nothing left in the debris pile except some residue of molten iron.
Get down below and you'd see molten steel running down the channel rails, like you're in a foundry.
These incredibly hot areas were found at the bottoms of the elevator shafts, down 7 basement levels. The molten steel was found 3, 4, and 5 weeks later when the rubble was being removed. He said that molten steel was also found at World Trade Center 7.
This material is not normal thermite. That's the other thing that really needs to be understood. Anybody could make normal thermite. You can get the ingredients, you can mix them together, you can make them. Any kid could basically do it if they knew the recipe. This material is composed of, the real key ingredient that I don't think anybody else could really make in a convenient way is the nano aluminum. It's a controlled substance. I could go buy it, but the government limits how much I can buy of it. It's very, very difficult to produce in these sizes and to keep from reacting. It's not something that you just get at the local 5 and dime or you're going to make on your own. It's a very, very difficult to make material. And that's the one thing in there that really tells me specifically that this wasn't some guys working in caves in Afghanistan, or it wasn't somebody in their basement doing this. This was, a massive engineering operation that made these materials. So the military uses it for a number of different applications. Another one, if you do a search on Google for thermite and building demolition, you can find all sorts of wonderful devices that have been fabricated and invented that use thermite for building demolitions. An example would be that in 1984 there was a patent issued for thermite cutter charges to be used in building demolitions that could shoot molten iron through the structural steel in milliseconds.
The fucking bomb that you got, there's no goddamn way that could have happened.
You can imagine when you assemble these chemicals on a large scale, the amount of heat that you generate. You can imagine when you assemble these chemicals on a large scale, the amount of heat that you generate.
They could not risk allowing the people to form their own opinions about what they were seeing. It was imperative to immediately before it actually happened.
On the latest building collapse in New York, you might have heard a few moments ago, was talking about the Salomon Brothers building collapsing. And indeed it has. Apparently that's only a few hundred yards away from where the World Trade Center towers were. And it seems that this was not a result of a new attack. It was because the building had been weakened during this morning's attacks.
They already told you it collapsed and gave you the official reason why it collapsed.
As you can see behind me,
we can see behind Jane, and we see that Building 7 is still standing. Of course, Building 7 does drop straight down into its own footprint in free fall time, just like a standard controlled demolition. But this happens 20 minutes later. This is no less suspicious than if they had announced the Kennedy assassination 20 minutes before it happened.
Bulletin. This is from the United Press from Dallas. President Kennedy and Governor John Connally have been cut down by assassins' bullets in downtown Dallas.
Ridiculous thing to say. Ridiculous. Okay, let's talk about your BBC. I have a tape of a BBC reporter broadcasting directly back to England talking about a third building has collapsed. World Trade Center Building 7 talks for 7 minutes. All the while she's talking, World Trade Center Building 7 is still standing right behind her. It didn't fall for another half hour. Yet they were doing a pre-broadcast back to England that, yes, it's true,
you need to
that
take a
this
break
building fell and it hadn't fallen yet.